Hi there. Thank you guys so much for listening to Grounded in Maine today. My name is Amy Fagan, and my special guest today is Melissa Meadow, also known as the Modern Mortician. And this is just, I happened to see Melissa on Instagram one day, and she was talking about burial practices, and it caught my ear, and am fascinated. I'm just fascinated with this, and so the information she was giving was a little bit shocking, but also really important. So I wanted to make sure to share that with you guys. So Melissa, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate this.
Yes, thank you for having me, of course.
So, modern mortician, where did that come from?
So social media was just starting to kick off. I feel like around the time that I came up with the name The Modern Mortician, I was working for a funeral home that was definitely outside the box. It was a mobile funeral home, and it was a new concept in Austin, Texas. And they had mobile, modern, and memorable or something on the back of the window. And I was like, I really am a modern mortician because we're doing funerals at like the zoo or, in people's front yards. So it coined that way and just kind of went from there. And I started teaching people of the things that are now more modern day death care rather than, what's been, marketed to us so far as a society.
Wow, I love that name. I think that is so freaking smart. And it really fits you.
Thanks.
Um,
It used to be mod mortician because Instagram didn't have enough characters, but then as soon as they had enough characters, I got them all.
Mod is not bad either.
No, I had somebody interview me back in Austin, and I guess the kid never really looked at my profile or anything. He just thought, oh, cool, I can interview a mortician. When he and his girlfriend got there to interview me, he goes, oh, I thought you meant mod like 60s. I thought you were going to be like, this mod. And I was like, no, but I wish I could. But you still got me.
Right. You got me. You're welcome.
Yeah.
So where did you well, so you were working in Texas at this mobile uh
Yeah.
mortician.
Mobile funeral home.
Yeah.
Um, it was one of, see, my career in death care has spanned almost 20 years. And as I became more outspoken online, it was hard for me to get positions in traditional funeral homes because they were like, she's going to narc us out. So I was able to get these interesting jobs. Like I saw this commercial, or it's like a CNN thing, but that they pay for those kind of spots where they were doing a thing about this mobile van that would come to your home with all these urns in it, like a little showroom. And I was like, that's fascinating. But I decided to reach out to him. I was like, there are people in Austin, Texas that want a different thing. And so they brought their Houston operations and opened up a business in Austin for me. But their financing and their money people and all of that, it was just one of those things where it rose and fell very quickly. And so my location was one of the first ones to get cut.
Mm.
But that's the alternative of the funeral industry that I kicked into. At this point, I was already very into green burial, and that was another reason the traditional funeral homes didn't want to touch me.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Just
It's hard to catch things on. People are we're such creatures of habit and, tradition, right?
Mhm.
But so what exactly is green burial?
So green burial is where the body has not been embalmed. There's no intervention as far as chemicals or things like that. The body can still be bathed, dressed, or shrouded, different things like that. But the point is not to introduce plastics, not to introduce chemicals and preservatives, and to let the body return to nature. And with green burial, it can be achieved at a traditional cemetery, but they're going to have rules like you have to use the concrete liner, or else the grave's going to cave in, different things like that that aren't necessarily required. Right. Many cemeteries can like make adjustments for Jewish or Muslim funerals, but they make them buy the vaults and flip them upside down. So there's a hard casing over the decedent underneath. And that's a traditional cemetery. Why do they do that? Because they have heavy machinery that drives over these graves, and it can cause divots if they don't, reinforce them.
Right.
So green burial can be achieved in the most green burial way in a green burial cemetery or a conservation cemetery. And the conservation cemeteries are a whole nother thing.
I was going to ask, like, are there different like levels of green burial? So this is so fascinating.
So there's three levels: hybrid, green, and conservation. Hybrid is where you have an existing traditional cemetery that finally got smart and added a green burial section on some undeveloped land. And they won't allow for any pesticides over there. It's going to be different, landscaping and stuff like that. But some of them are trying. I'll give them that. You guys in Maine have one that is a hybrid. Let's see. Cemetery Burr is a hybrid burial ground. It has a core of historic marble headstones dating from the 1800s. So a lot of the hybrid cemeteries are some that have been very old cemeteries, and now they're developing new sections to be green burial. So this one has a trail leading into the graves and also into Frost Gully Wood, a small parcel owned by Freeport Conservation Trust that's open to the public, but
Oh,
others say no.
Cross
So
Gully
it's
caught my
hybrid.
attention. Freeport is right, it's next door to where I lived.
Yeah, so there's that. It's 2 acres in a 6.5 acre conventional cemetery. So
Awesome.
2 acres of that is set aside for green burial. So hybrid again is where you've got the green that's been attached to an existing cemetery, whether it's a pioneer cemetery or more modern, like the 1900s up. The next one being green. The body can be in a cardboard box that's been decorated by the family.
Oh
Seen
my
that
God.
done.
I love
Yeah,
that.
you put pictures all over it. It can become like a that home funerals. That's a whole nother thing. But family can get involved in
Oh.
decorating. What?
Home funerals?
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about home funerals
Oh
too. You
yeah.
have the right to care for your own loved ones after they've died, just as you do when they are alive. So, green burial is just keeping it simple. No preservatives. The body can be refrigerated. That is the alternative to embalming, the preservation process. If you refrigerate a body, or the funeral home refrigerates the body and they keep the body dry, you won't have any problems. A lot of them are really afraid because they're so used to embalming, but I think we're switching into a time where the newer funeral directors and embalmers that are getting into the industry are better prepared than it seems like the old guard was.
Mhm.
So they always defaulted to try and push people to embalming because it was, easier for them, more predictable. So going on from green, you have conservation. This is where they've set up land trusts, different things like that, where it is meant to protect the land. So say developments are going up in an area and you've got this parcel of land that wildlife lives on and different things like that, and you want to protect it, put bodies on it. But you just always have to have there's tell you, hold on, I can tell you how to have a burial park out there in Maine here in a second. But real quick, some of the conservation cemeteries located in Maine: Winthrop, Baldwin Hill Conservation Cemetery. It's a 10-acre cemetery in Fayette, Maine, adjacent to the Kennebec Land Trust 80-acre Baldwin Hill Conservation Area. So that cemetery intends to be a place where people can mark the end of a life in a meaningful way while surrounded by the beauty of the natural world. They
Oh,
opened July of 2021. Looking at their website, I mean, if anybody's listening to this, make sure they either, hit back up or write down stuff, or if we can provide like links to these different locations.
sure.
They have pictures up. It'll blow your mind. It's like walking into a national forest sometimes, or a national park. It's just the graves blend in with nature. They're not on traditional marble or brass headstones or, different things like that, granite. They're like on flat flagstone markers or like little boulders that have somebody's name etched and painted into it. The whole point is to be just as natural and to the ground as possible, that you are in the ground that you're in. Another one is Cedar Brook Burial Ground. It's in Leamington, Maine.
Okay.
Um, The gentleman that founded that one passed away last March. Um, he settled in Leamington 30 years ago when he purchased a 150-acre parcel of land from an elderly gentleman that was retiring and moving out of the area.
Hmm.
This gentleman, Peter, loved land and maintained it in tree growth throughout all the years before being buried out there. And then you've got another one that's trying to get going. It's called Rainbow's End Natural Cemetery. And it's 14 acres of meadow and pine forest that hug the Penobscot River,
Penobscot.
Penobscot River, just south of Bangor, Maine.
Okay.
Uh, yeah,
That's cool.
so
They're
that
kind of spread out. That's awesome.
so
So
that
they're
gives you at least wide area. So folks that have land out there that want to protect it and want to open a green burial park, it's really very simple in the state of Maine. As simple as it can be when you're working with government stuff, right?
mm,
You first start with the Department of Health and Human Services and you let them know what you want to do, and then they'll have you get the land surveyed, register the section with the county registry of deeds, set up a nonprofit with a board of directors, make sure you're complying with any local zoning ordinances, and not allow any burials within 250 feet of potable water.
okay.
Pretty
Yeah.
simple.
That doesn't sound so hard. So you could technically do that on your own land if you chose.
Yes.
That's interesting.
The hiccup with doing it on your own land is you have to understand that if you sell the land in the future, if it's not set up like a nonprofit or something, you always have to have an easement to the burial spot. So, say you just want to do family burials on your land, you can arrange that, but you must always have an easement to where your family, your ancestors can approach those grave sites, without
Gotcha. Right. Without
along
disturbing, yeah, without
neighbors in the
trouble,
way. Yeah.
the new owners. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. So tell me, Melissa, how did you get into this? Like, I know you've been doing it for about 20 years, but what
Yeah.
happened before
Um,
that?
I initially started out, my story is kind of cute. So it was like the summer before my senior year in high school. And I remember I was sitting at the kitchen table doing something. My mom was in the kitchen, meh, 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 meh. The news was on, and they were interviewing local family owned businesses that needed help for the summer. And I was looking for a summer job. So I was paying attention. They interviewed like a plumber and something else. And then this lady came on and was talking about funeral home. And my mom pipes in from the kitchen, "Oh, you should go work at the funeral home for the summer. That would be right up your alley." Well, this is the 90s, right? And I was one of those girls that was wearing like flannel t-shirts and Doc Martens. So my mom was convinced that I was a goth, even though I was a little more alternative. So I was like, I will. I'll apply. I will. And I got the job because the lady that was in charge of hiring and the owner of the place, she knew my grandfather from small town communities in the area. So it was a shoe in on that. And that's what got me into funeral service at first. Some guys that work in the embalming and preparation of the bodies invited me back to try to spook me one day. They had the top of a skull, a
Oh,
calabarum, and they had come out from the embalming room. They were working on a post autopsy case, and they brought this out to me to try to freak me out. I was fascinated because this isn't something that you see of another human
right,
ever,
right.
and it was just the fissures and the lining in the bones just was so beautiful to see what nature creates, in us. And so since I didn't take it like, oh, and freak out, they invited me to come back and start watching procedures and things like that. So that's how I kind of got interested in it. And it wasn't until years later I was working at Six Flags over Texas and Arlington as a face
Oh,
painter.
that's very different. Oh, face painting though.
I was face painting, yes. Um, and that's when I met somebody that was going to mortuary school, and I'm like, "There's a freaking school for this? Sign me up!" So I went. I went to mortuary school. And initially, it was taking somebody that looked sick and frail and broken and reviving them. Basically, it was the art and the science of taking somebody and giving them life again. And the whole goal was to make people look alive in their caskets. The longer I was in it, the more I seemed to see that that was hindering people from the right amount of grief or opening the door to grief and grieving and letting go of the person.
Yeah, okay.
That's what got me going, okay, well, what can we do instead of embalming? And then we're in these out in West Texas. The cemeteries out there, a lot of them are pioneer cemeteries that have just grown in the community or whatever. And I was asking a gravedigger one day, you know, how come we have to have vaults in this side of the cemetery, but over there they clearly weren't even making vaults at that time, etc. And he was like, honey, you're gonna learn that the casket men have it in with the funeral homes have it in with the grave diggers get a kickback from the vault company, and it goes around in a circle. And
Mm,
I was like, so basically, they've made these rules that you have to have this.
right.
And that's when I started posting on Facebook, green burial this, green burial that, green burial this. Um, so that's where I started to already like put a hindering on myself to be able to work in other traditional funeral homes at that point,
Yeah,
because I was already talking about the alternatives way back then before these things got popular. So
interesting. Okay. I love that the just the how it went, so you started out a summer job or, between school years and the funeral home, and then you were doing face painting. So that turned into makeup artist for um I love it. That's so fun. I mean, fun. Sure. Uh
learning how to hold a paintbrush to somebody's living face that's squirming around was great
there.
training for the day that I would need to use those tools on somebody that was
Yeah.
laying.
I mean, the whole like making someone look alive. I I can sort of see both sides. Like you don't want to see someone whose face is all sunken in and like gray, but at the same time it must be like almost hopeful to see them looking, except for their eyes being open, looking very much, pinked up and alive. Interesting. It's just so interesting. So in green burial and is it makeup or is it paint that you use? I'm just curious.
Really, funeral directors have a lot of different tips and tricks for how to disclose, like cover things, blemishes, different things like that, fill, sunken eyes and such. I would find myself using a old lady's just perfect. I couldn't use a regular eyeliner pen because the tissue at that point will pull the
Mhm.
ink and it would go into their little wrinkles. So if you had it on the end of a paintbrush, you could just go right along the lash line and it would fill it just fine. So different things like that that you're wanting to touch up on. Another thing I would use a paintbrush for would be like if somebody had like a scab or a really bad gash or something here, and we clean it up and we fill it with the wax, you would use the paintbrush to go in and smooth it into the skin. If you used another product that was in the embalming room called Dryine, you would just dip your brush in that and it would just smooth it right into the skin where you couldn't even tell that anything had been going on there. So there are a lot of cool things that funeral homes do on the back end and behind the scenes to give people that peaceful good look for a goodbye.
Mhm.
Things that I do for natural burial cases is when they are being held in refrigeration, the main thing is don't put a sheet or anything over their face because it can push their nose down. So
Oh,
that's something you want to, be really cautious about for a green burial. And then if you also like wrap a towel or use a catheter band to keep the person's mouth shut when they're in refrigeration between the time of passing to if you had an open casket viewing or anything like that, you're setting those features for the future viewing,
okay.
because those things are achieved when you embalm the body and you use additional tools like glue or suture needles and things like that. Some families don't want that on their natural burial client families or on their loved ones that are going for natural burial because that kind of introduces things that aren't exactly natural.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. And so what is the difference? Like factually, what is the difference between a traditional and a green burial, other than like the box that they're buried in? But you were saying chemicals.
Right. So when the body is embalmed for an open casket viewing, which is what Americans have traditionally done since, the Civil War. When that's when all of this started, the embalming process was getting soldiers home back to their families in the north or whatnot, how to preserve the body. They started with things like arsenic and different, cocktails on the battlefield. And then we had the president at that time, Lincoln, he died. And so they did a national tour of his embalmed body where at every stop they re-injected him and made him look really good for all the other stops. So that's what kind of got embalming going. And funeral homes, this is a not only a moneymaker because they can add in additional charges anywhere from like 550 up to 2500 for embalming services, just depending on where you go. And because people think that that's the default, when the funeral director says, do you want us to begin get started on the embalming, they think, oh my gosh, if I don't, they're going to start decomposing, they're going to fall apart.
Right.
So with embalming, what they're doing is injecting into the vascular system a mixture of water and formaldehyde. And in that formaldehyde solution, there's also like agents like moisturizing agents and different things like that that can perfuse through the skin as it's injected through the common carotid artery, and it will drain out the jugular vein. And then the fluid that comes out goes into the municipal water system, right down a
Oh,
regular drain.
jeez.
Yeah. So you've
Okay.
got that going on. You've got plastic caps that can be placed in the eyes to provide a roundness because your eyes kind of start to deflate. And
What
you've also,
plastic caps in your eye? In?
yes, they lift the eyelid up and then place these plastic caps that almost cover the whole eye over your eye and then close your lid over it so it would have that, concave.
Oh, oh my gosh. Okay.
And they'll put these little plastic mouth formers in your mouth too that look like, those things the football players put in their
Like,
mouth,
like the mouth
except
guard.
it's
Yeah.
just covered their teeth. And so it's like if somebody's missing their dentures or something, you can put that in and goes all the way around your mouth, and then you position the lips over it to make it look
Okay.
natural. So there's a lot of things within embalmed bodies. In my experience, when you're adding pressure to a body, so you're pushing in this fluid, building up pressure, you're more likely to have incidents of leakage. Like a lot of funeral directors are afraid if I don't embalm this body, they're going to leak or they're going to purge. These are terms, that they use to express, liquid coming from the eyes, the nose, or the mouth, anus,
Okay.
places like that. So what they'll do is um, put plastic underwear or plastic pants on the decedent, sometimes plastic overalls, and you've got all of that going on, and then your clothing over it. So, um, where I was going with that was I've seen more embalmed bodies have those leakage issues than I have seen unembalmed bodies have them. Now they're not saying that they absolutely won't have issues like that because when you die, obviously nature starts to happen. And if you have died of certain things where you're on certain medications that maybe have your body swollen, different things like that, you can start to lose some of that, through your actual skin tissue, like your arms or, your body or your legs. So there's different things to pay attention to. Some of that is halted by embalming a body because it's basically solidifying the tissues. And then you're also removing the fluids from inside the abdomen and the thoracic cavity so that you don't have any problems going that's where all the gut microbial action is. So they want to harness that and keep it from doing anything. Now, an unembalmed body needs to be kept in refrigeration so that you don't have those the clock ticking down on those times. In my experience, I have held a deceased individual for 6 weeks in refrigeration with no problems. That was because it was a burial at sea, and we had to wait for somebody to get off military leave to make it, and then also make sure that the seas weren't going to be crazy.
Yeah.
So,
I was going to
yeah,
ask about burial at sea. Yay.
yeah,
I'm glad that you brought
yep,
that up.
yeah. So with burial at sea, you can do it in a casket or you can do it in a shroud or you can just be scattered. And
What
it is
exactly is
legal
a
in Maine.
shroud?
A shroud. So think of a shroud like a bed sheet that you're tucking around somebody and making them look like a burrito.
Okay.
You tuck it over their face and you with a shroud you can like put flowers in it with the little straps that cover across the body. You kind of tie them up and they look like a little wrapped mummy tortilla.
I was going to ask about that too.
Yeah, you can just decorate it with flowers and different things like that. And that kind of segues into the home funeral thing. Um, what people are allowed to do, say, okay, so I'll give an example of something I did. A lady knew her husband was terminal. He was on hospice at home. The plan was when he dies, we're going to give him a sponge bath, basically change his clothes. He will lie in state in his bedroom, in his bed, where people can come in there and say goodbye to him, if they didn't make it while he was still alive. They were inviting people, obviously, while they were alive. But the point of that was they didn't want him in a place that wasn't home, that wasn't
Right.
comfortable to them. They had children involved. What they did was they opted for the cardboard burial container, which is basically just a cardboard cremation container. Brought that to the house. They had it set up in the living room with, I guess they had Facebook Live or something where his friends were logging in and saying, sign my name or draw a spaghetti monster or do this. Make sure print this picture out. I'm going to send it to you and tape it on there. They had ramen noodles drawn on it. I mean, because his favorite thing was ramen,
Oh
and he
my
was like known for
gosh.
making ramen. Just all kinds of different things, and it was a participatory activity that kind of separated them from the hardest part of the grief because you were surrounded by people that loved this gentleman
Yeah.
and loved their family. And it was a come and go kind of a thing. They kept him overnight. And what you have to do in those situations is it's not a situation where, oh my gosh, you got to refrigerate them. You have time. Um, Frozen bags of peas. What I like to have people do is get the gel packs from like Home Depot or something ahead of time. You got people in your Facebook marketplace groups or whatever, they get medication all the time and they have these gel packs left. It's good if you know you're preparing for a home funeral to get those ahead of time. That way you can just rotate them out of your freezer under the specific parts of the body that need to be cooled the most, which would be the small of the back, the chest, the abdomen, and between the legs and under the armpits. And you just put enough of those little gel packs around and you rotate them, and they're going to keep the body cool enough to be able to keep it in the home, depending on the outside temperatures and the time of year. Obviously, in Texas, you can't do 2 days very easily in the summer, but depending on everything else, people could do up to 2 days, maybe even three, depending on the state, in their home.
Okay.
There are hospice houses that are popping up where families, their loved ones go there to die, and then they'll have a celebration or a gathering there before disposition, being cremation, burial, whatever direction it goes after that.
Amazing. Wow. And can you also, I mean, this is, gosh, I just like this whole world is opening up. That I was just, we just know, you're going to be buried in a coffin, like whole body or cremated. And those, as far as I knew, those were like the options, except, my grandmother donated her body to science. And so, there's another option, of course, and then the rest of it was cremated. But what else is there?
Okay, so you guys have um, legalized water cremation. Water cremation is the eco-friendly alternative to flame, and it has not gotten its due marketing. Everybody's heard of natural organic reduction at this point, right? Human composting.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of people have heard of it, the human composting aspect, and that's also legal in your state. There are no facilities yet.
Yeah.
Um,
So I've heard of it, but what exactly? I don't want to give off that I know a lot, but I have heard the phrase.
okay, so I'll tell you about it first, and we'll go back into water cremation. So the natural organic reduction um, is where the human body is composted. And then the mulch, or they call it soil, but to be honest with you, if you're scientifically looking at it, it's mulch. The soil that you Okay, so the body, you might have to edit this part. Hold on. So the natural organic reduction, they take your deceased body and they place it in a vessel that's holding like two-thirds the amount of materials, and then your body, and then they put the other third of amount of
Okay.
materials. So the materials are usually alfalfa, wood chips, different things like that. Depending on the company, there's now like five different ones, and they're either all in Washington or a couple of them are in Colorado. Um, your body can be flown to one of these places, even though it's legal in Maine and there's nobody offering it yet. You know, just like with any other disposition, if you wanted to be buried in another state, your body can be transported to one of these facilities that does that. What it yields at the end of a 2 month process is a cubic yard of material, soil, and I mean enough to fit in the back of a pickup bed, right?
So
So
the
a lot
body
of
can break down in 2 months?
yes, because they're controlling the heat, they're controlling the moisture in these little vessels. They're monitoring them all like that. They rotate them. They halfway through the process open the vessels up and remove the bones so they can be pulverized, processed, and placed back into the mixture. Otherwise, the bones would come through, solid.
Right, right. Oh, wow.
So they do that process, and then at the end of it, you've got they can give you like just a bag full, and then the rest is, placed on protected land or something that they're trying to like one company called Recompose. They work with a tribe in the Washington area that has land that needs revitalization, and so they're extra clients, that don't get taken home by the family or donated to rebuild that land and things like that. So yeah,
Wow. This is fascinating.
right. I'm personally am not a huge fan of water. I mean, of natural organic reduction. I think it has been rushed to market. But the reason I say like you may have heard about that one before is because it's been on NPR. There's now
Hmm.
multiple companies that do it. Um, you've even had one of the natural organic reduction companies be on Shark Tank, for goodness sake. So that's had more marketing
Okay.
than
So it's
water
had more
treatment.
hype than actual research, is
Yes,
kind of
yes.
okay. What is the
Um,
vessel? Is it what is the
the
vessel?
vessel, so it's usually like 7 foot wide, maybe 3 or 4 feet deep, 3 or 4 feet wide, and depends on the place because there's earth funeral. Theirs looks like a wall of, just squares, a very sci-fi looking thing where all the bodies are in them. Recompose was the first main one that did it, and they have these like honeycomb. It's so sci-fi when you really look at it. It's just like it's definitely there to appease people and appeal to the architectural mind. But I'm not a fan of hanging out in a warehouse for 2 months before I get dispersed. Personally, that's me. But people may opt for this as an alternative to green burial if they don't have a green burial location in their area. However, they would have to have access to the natural organic reduction or facility.
Right. And you had said you had said bodies, so it that just made my mind go to, is this like I've had this happen with pets, like, they're like, would you like them to be cremated on their own, or are you okay with, combining? So is that how it is? It's like a group?
Thankfully, no.
Okay.
Each deceased
Okay.
human has their own vessel.
Okay.
It's completely their own little vessel. And I do encourage you to look up some of these human composting places online afterwards to get an idea of what I'm talking about. But
Sure.
yeah, imagine the little honeycomb with a circle in the middle, and going into it from, head to toe is a human laying in there in that vessel, and it gets turned, and they're monitoring the heat and the moisture content and things like that. Yeah, and then halfway through, they dump it all out on a conveyor belt and get the bones out and grind them up and put it back in. They get out the metals and different things like that. Yeah, so it's not as simple as just being buried.
Sure.
Green burial, that's green burial. You're just in the
Right.
ground. That's it. This other thing, natural organic reduction, is very um processed
Okay.
process, but it is again an option. So I don't want to yuck anybody's yum because it's great that it's an option, but my concerns that they're not answering are what about the forever chemicals that we're now finding in human bodies?
Oh yeah.
If we are dispersing that into land, trying to revitalize it, what are we
What are
doing?
we
You
actually
know,
doing? Right.
what are we actually
Well,
doing? Oh yeah,
especially in Maine, where a lot of the PFAS was found and dumped. Um, okay, that's really interesting and a totally different point that I had not even considered before. And I'm sorry to have taken you away from, you were going to talk about
water,
water
water cremation,
cremation. All right,
water cremation. Yep.
go for it, because
So
wow.
natural organic reduction had all this push behind it, all this marketing. While in the meantime, water cremation has been legalized since 2009 in Maine. You've got two facilities that I was able to find. One's in Belfast and one is in Portland.
Okay.
Um, they both have the water cremation machine. And what it is the body is placed on a tray and put into the vessel, typically nude. If the family wants them dressed, it's got to be a biodegradable, very thin material that will break down during this process. The body is placed inside, and it looks like one machine looks like a big giant washing machine. The other one looks like a tube. It's they're very interesting. They're scientific. It's really cool. Better than a flame crematory retort if you look at them side by side. But the body goes in and 95% water and 5% alkali solution mix, like sodium hydroxide and sodium potassium. So you've got your breaking down agents, right? And 95% water. So it's doing like a wash cycle basically. The body is there, the water swirls around it, and when you sit in the bathtub too long, you know your fingers start to get wrinkly.
Yep.
It just continues that. It's not baking you, broiling you. People have been like, "Oh, is it Breaking Bad?" And I'm like, "No, it's somewhere between a spa day for your corpse and Breaking Bad." There's a happy medium in the middle there.
Okay.
So with the water cremation, what's left at the end of the process is effluent, which is the liquid part that can go and be dispersed into, grasslands, different things like that. If you wanted to return it to nature, there's like, for example, in Colorado, there's Be a Tree cremation. That's what she does is she facilitates water cremation for families and then dispersing the liquid part of them into a meadow or field that, so then you're really returning to nature. The alternative to that is that it goes into the municipal water system. Now, the reason this is better than embalming is because there's so many detergents and things that have been in the alkaline hydrolysis solution that it's actually really good for the local municipalities. It cleans out the pipes as it goes. Yeah, so then you have some states that have legalized water cremation, but their areas won't allow it because plumbing's not up to par. So yeah, so the
Okay.
water
So
cremation.
I'm just thinking about gosh, this is just it's so fascinating and weird at the very same time. And I'm wow. So it's like putting a body in a washing machine and then doing the
Kind of,
agitation
except it's a
cycle.
deep one. It's just like a deep one. You're still laying down the whole time. You're not folded up or anything like that.
You're not like tumbling and
No, not at
okay.
all.
All
It's just
right.
the
Way
water is
better.
doing its thing around you.
I was
They've
like,
got,
that sounds mean.
I know I'm terrible at describing things.
No, I that's just
Maybe.
where my head, you said washing machine and I was like,
Yeah, I'm thinking of a certain model. The resumation machine looks like a giant washing machine. But yeah, you go in kind of like you would in the honeycomb vessel of
you're
the
not getting
natural.
beaten up or anything. You're just
No, it's just
okay.
the water is going
All right.
around and shooting
Cool.
on you. So that's the liquid portion of you. What's left is the most basic element of a human, carbon phosphate, which is your bones. So the bones, just like with flame cremation at the end, are pulled out of the machine. Um, and then they're pulverized. When the water cremated remains are pulverized, it looks very much like talcum powder because they have just been returned to such a basic element. It's like talcum powder. There's no pH negativity or anything like that. With flame cremation, you have to worry about, like, if you're going to plant a tree or something, you have to worry about the pH of the materials. And uh, flame cremated remains will kill plants. People talk about burying them with a tree or something like that. You have to protect the roots of the plant from the cremated remains. So that leads me to kind of want to touch on Life Forest that's out in Auburn, Maine. They have a conservation burial area for just cremated remains where they are wrapped in a wool to protect the surrounding land area, whatever, from the pH negativity of the flame cremated remains. And so people have like deeds to these little plots of land inside this conservation burial park with GPS coordinates and like QR codes with little people's names and pictures on them. So many cool things. And
Oh,
yeah, it's a life forest at Whistle Ridge. It's 80 acres of
80
land.
acres of
Yeah,
ashes.
not yet. They're new. So, but they have
Oh,
80
okay.
acres to do this with. Yeah.
Wow.
So with the water cremated remains, you can bury, them around a plant. They're still not gonna like provide it nutrients or anything like that, but it's not
But
pH
they're not
negative
going to
to where
hurt
it
it.
could harm it. Yeah.
Oh,
So when you do a flame cremation, there is the possibility of commingling because the bricking inside of these flame retorts can sometimes catch little pieces of bone. So when the funeral director or the whoever is running the machine, when they rake out the bones at the end of the process, you have to be very careful to get up in the corners and things like that, and you can't be 100%. So with water cremation, there's no commingling because it's stainless steel. It all comes out together. It's all very smooth and then breaks down into the powder. So that's another key difference.
oh my gosh.
Flame cremation puts enough carbon into the atmosphere is a 500-mile car trip. And when you think of how many people get cremation because they think it's the easier solution, they're not, taking up space, things like that. Some
Totally.
of these funeral homes have 3 crematory retorts and they're running all day long. So you've got 4 in each one. Imagine all of that carbon that's being put out, whereas it's not happening with water cremation.
Did you
Yes, you're using,
did you
huh?
say, I'm sorry, did you say one cremation, like one body cremation is the same as a 500-mile car trip?
Yes.
One body. Oh my gosh. And if it's going
And
all
then
day long, oh my gosh.
yeah, so some funeral homes just have 1 crematory retort. Some of these big conglomerates have like 3 and they're constantly running. You can do about 4 a day without overheating the machine, sometimes 5 if they're thinner individuals. Um, but yeah, those are running all the time, sending stuff into the atmosphere. And then funeral directors and stuff like to say, oh, the mercury is not a problem. People have fillings. Like that's for a while in the funeral industry, they were like people that were doing long bone donations at the time of death, or cornea donations, different things like that. With the long bone donations, they were replacing the bone with PVC pipe. And then after the funeral, sending them to be cremated. I went to mortuary school with a girl that is now permanently disabled from running a crematory for one of these conglomerates before they realized that, oh, maybe she should be wearing a mask because halfway through the process, you have to open the door and check on them. So she's been,
Oh,
harmed.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
That is, oh, that's tragic. Okay. So you're saying, so when you say long bone, you mean like a leg bone?
Yeah, legs or arms. Sometimes when people pass away and, they're middle age, they'll, well, this happens a lot. Families will get a phone call if their person has passed away unexpectedly and it's, not like from a disease or anything like that, where they want to do tissue donation
Okay.
procurement, or they want, to get your corneas, but also they'll ask for long bone donations. I don't know if it's the marrow in the bones. I don't remember what it is that they do with that, but they will remove the entire bone and then now they replace it, thankfully, with wooden dowels
Okay.
and then we would just sew the arm back up so it's not like flapping around.
My God. Oh my gosh, this is just wild. And thank you for sharing all of
Yeah.
this. I like, I feel so stupid, and I'm so grateful that I am more, better informed now. I had no idea there were all these different methods and for death care. Jeez,
I
are
want
they,
to go back to a comparison on, people choosing flame cremation because they just think it's easier and it takes up less space. Look at the water and also reconsider the green burial or the conservation burial because if you fly anywhere in the United States, you can see how vast areas are. You're not going to get a green burial park in the middle of a metropolitan city. That's not the point. You're going to get it out in the country or out in in nature. And the point is to take you out of, the hubbub and into a place of peacefulness.
hmm Wow. Um, could do you have an idea of cost? Like, I mean, I know a lot of one of the things that is so hard about the word sustainability in my mind is like if something has the word sustainable or eco-friendly, it's like usually a lot more expensive. And I mean, funeral homes themselves are like insanely expensive. But so a green burial or these other methods, like how do they compare? Do you have an idea?
So the most expensive obviously is an embalming with a casket and burial. Then the next most expensive one is the natural organic reduction. Since you don't have a facility in your state, you need to have the loved one flown out, which is far more common than people realize. And you got to consider it's a carbon neutral trip because either way that plane was going to go to that location, you just happen to catch a ride in the bottom half of it. Um, yes, every commercial airline that you go on, there's probably somebody riding underneath that is no longer alive.
Oh my
So,
God.
fun
Every
fact,
plane?
almost every commercial flight.
Oh,
Yes.
that is wild. Oh my gosh, you're blowing my mind, Melissa. This is so
It's
crazy.
so easy to do, to send people across state lines, for burials or different things like that. You do not have to be embalmed. That is a myth. Usually the flights to get somebody to another state are within the day. You're just
Right, of
fine
course.
with the jetpack. So the natural organic reduction's around $7,000, depending on the facility you use, including your flights and things like that. So
Including the
where
fright
you're
flight. Okay.
embalming above that, and then your natural organic reduction, then your green burial, because you have to consider that you're going to need space. If you're utilizing a funeral home, they're going to make you pay for refrigeration and body care. Um, I need to bring up some resources real quick. The Funeral Consumer Alliance of Maine and the National Home Funeral Alliance. Those are organizations that can help families with the logistics of doing a home funeral and cutting out as much of the funeral home as they feel comfortable with. Um,
Okay.
so there's that to know. So your green burial, you would need a plot, transportation to it, and then however much involvement the funeral home has with the care of the decedent. And when it comes to a vessel, it could be as simple as grandma's favorite cotton quilt that we would wrap her up in that, secure it, at the shoulders, elbows, and waist and knees with like straps. So
Okay.
you've made your little taquito burrito or whatever it is, and then decorate it with flowers inside the straps. So that's one way that it can happen. You can order a custom shroud from companies now. They have like hemp shrouds or, cotton shrouds, denim shrouds, fabrics, Kikaro out of California is one of the pioneer ones that did that
Hmm.
back when 6 Feet Under was on HBO. So that's when a lot of people became familiar with green burial.
Oh, well,
So
that explains why
very,
I didn't know anything about it.
you didn't watch 6 Feet
I've never
Under?
had HBO.
Oh,
And
well, if you
I
ever get
definitely never
time,
watched the show.
it might be on Netflix now. It was really good. So green burial would be kind of in the middle. I would say the expectation is $3,000 to $5,000 there.
Okay.
You can get a wicker basket casket. You can get a bamboo casket. You can get a pine box casket, the cardboard casket I was talking about earlier. Things to know, you do not have to get these from a funeral home. You can either source them into your house, like the sheets or whatever, or there's a company like TitanCasket.com. They provide the caskets for Walmart and Costco. So you're getting it direct from them. They
You
ship
could
it
buy a
directly to the
casket at
funeral
Walmart.
home. Yes. Yes, but skip Walmart, Costco, and Amazon and go right to the source, Titan
Yeah,
casket.
sure.
You can have any color casket. This is metal, obviously, but the green barrel ones, they have wool caskets. They've
Mm,
got wicker basket caskets. Beautiful green burial options. Really, really beautiful if you're wanting to spend money and get different things.
I love
So
that. Oh my gosh, this is very cool. Okay. So how about the washing machine one?
the
Water
water
cremation.
cremation would be the next step down on cost, where flame cremation is going to be the lowest. The reason why flame cremation costs less than water is because water is still a novelty and it is also not widely available. Almost every funeral home had either their own flame cremation retort on site or they were partnered with a mortuary service that had that capability.
Well, I would
When the
assume that
water
the water
cremation,
cremation would be more labor intensive too, wouldn't it?
you say,
Would
I'm sorry, say that again.
I would think that the water cremation would be more labor intensive. Is
No,
that
not at
right?
all.
No?
No, because with a flame cremation, you have to stop the process halfway through and stir what's going on in the retort to
Sure,
make
what's
sure that,
going on?
yeah, just to make sure that everything gets, evaporated properly. Yeah. So, and then, yeah, the reason with the water cremation being costing more is because the machinery is ridiculously expensive. We're
Mm,
talking like $1 million or, you know,
right.
yeah, it's really expensive. There's one company that launched at 500,000 and then it goes up to like $1 million for these machines. Um, and the funeral homes don't want to invest that kind of money in something that isn't already hyped up and ready to go. So people have to know about it and ask about it and
Right.
start utilizing these facilities that have it before that price will finally go down.
Right.
Um, but I can tell you on the back end, it costs the same for a provider for flame cremation as it does for water cremation.
Oh,
And an example of that in Texas, that was the funeral home would pay the mortuary service $250 for a flame cremation. We were paying the same amount for a water cremation. It was just in another state. So if these had been in the same state, we would have been able to price them exactly the same and then let the consumer decide. And for a while, we did that. And consumers chose water um, over flame when they were given the same price and a description of the different processes.
oh,
So
that's
currently, water is priced more than flame, but my goal, my hope, is that someday it will be equal to or less than.
yeah. Can I ask a dumb question?
Oh no, go
Does
ahead.
it cost more for a corpse to fly?
Actually, yes, it is usually a little more expensive
They
than
don't
your
need a
$30
suit.
Southwest flights.
Mm,
Yeah, no, they load them in the bottom, and it's usually depending on the location they're going to anywhere from $300 to $700,
okay.
300 to 700.
Right. Yeah, sure. Okay. Gosh, this is fascinating. And are there other methods of death care that we haven't discussed already?
Scientific donation, and again, like you experienced, they'll take your loved one, do the scientific part that they're going to do. For example, when I was in mortuary school, we had cadavers that were scientifically donated bodies that we got to learn the different where the veins were by taking dissecting, and learning things like that. So the end process of that is that the body is cremated in Texas. We had University of Texas was doing water cremations. They've recently gotten in trouble for it, but for years we're doing water cremation and water cremation wasn't legal in Texas yet, but they were doing it at the University of Texas for donor bodies. So it's a 50-50. You may get flame cremated remains back or water cremated remains back in the future going forward with body donations. But it's important that people do research before the death happens. Because if you wait for the death to happen and then go, oh, body donation, there may not be a facility that can take your loved one.
Hmm.
And if you plan ahead, they have the time to reach out to a local funeral home in your area that can provide the transportation, the refrigeration, and get them to the flight that they need to for their scientific donation wherever they're going. But if a person has certain, cancer, leukemia, different things like that that are being studied by, it's really easy to get into some of those programs, but you have to do it in a timely manner with enough time for them to get your medical records, interview your family, interview you, and different things like that, depending upon whatever the cause of death is, as to
Okay.
how much they'll want to know.
All right. Ooh. Wow.
And there's also body farms.
What?
They're not as prevalent. Body farms are where you're donating your body to the body farm, and they will put it in different scenarios, like in the trunk of a car, or buried underneath cardboard boxes, or half up, half down. I don't know, to see the different what rates of decomposition for forensic scientists to go out.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
yeah. So the different soil here versus what's happening over here, and then like I've even heard of them putting a body in a tree before for whatever reason. Yeah, just
Not at
different.
Halloween.
No,
Oh my gosh, that's wild. What body
just
harm?
yeah, you can help science that way with forensics and the body farm. They may put you, just in a field or maybe in a forest or in the trunk of a car, different things like that.
Okay. And how much do you know about body donations? I'm just curious because I thought that I wanted to do it. After, I was so inspired by the experience with my grandmother. Like this was in Connecticut, and the year after she passed away, the whole family went there to the school, and they had this whole ceremony where like families had written cards and stories, and somebody, or the school, like they had written cards, and someone did poetry and they did songs and stuff like that, just to like, they called it a gratitude ceremony. And I thought it was so beautiful. And I was like, I want to do that. And then, like, everything I was reading, they're like, basically, you're too fat, Amy. You can't do that. And I'm like, oh, well, that's sorry.
Messed
Like
up.
there's no guarantee I'm going to be, the perfect weight by the time I pass away. So that's a hard thing to plan for.
Yeah.
But is that typical? Or is that like,
Yeah. So for scientific donation, where they're doing medical schools, they want a body without a lot of adipocere, the fat tissue and stuff like that, because it's easier for the students to see things. I think you should learn on everybody
yeah,
for
absolutely.
free, but whatever. Yeah. And
Not
then
my
with the
rules.
scientific, yeah, with the scientific donation, what has come up a lot lately, over the last few years, thankfully, it's been getting a lot more attention, is mishandling of remains, like bodies going to be test dummies for the military, and being blown up
What?
in cars. Oh yeah, that's happened. Or different parts of your body being sold and marketed off to, maybe collectors or
Hear
different
about
things like
that.
that. They had the whole Harvard thing where donated bodies there were having parts being sold to like curiosity shops.
At
Yeah.
Harvard?
Yes.
Holy dang.
Yeah.
What? That's so messed up.
So now I don't have a lot of trust in the whole body donation thing. What your family went through sounds like a very legitimate organization. There is not a lot of oversight in the body donation area. And
Oh,
that's why there's so many things that have, happened lately with that.
wow.
So,
Okay. Oh my goodness. Um, Anything else?
I would want to end on something good.
Please,
Um,
if you got it.
if I got it. No, we can just talk about how sustainable and with the death care thing. Yes, talking about it is scary, but a lot of professionals have said before me, talking about death is scary, but it's not going to kill you. It's going to make it so much easier on everybody else around you.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Because
Like,
you're like, what about the people you leave behind? Yeah. Give
totally.
them an idea of what you want. Do the research ahead of time. Ask questions. A lot of people, again, they don't know that embalming is not a requirement by law. It's usually a requirement by the funeral home because it's a controlled situation.
Yeah, for sure.
But things can easily be done without embalming, in my opinion, my
Mhm.
professional opinion.
Well,
And there
yeah,
are so many more options out there now, that are
absolutely.
way more economically friendly and sustainable.
So yeah, and so this is really interesting. So there are more eco-friendly options, but they are also less expensive than the funeral home route.
Right.
Interesting. Do you, this is going to be like, I should really just do some more research, but like a green burial, stuff like that, you still have to secure a spot, right? Which I know if you are, I know my grandmother purchased her gravesite years before she passed away. But it's, is it expensive? I don't even know.
So, no, it's really not. I've seen the prices range from 500 to 3,000. I mean, it's really going to depend on where you get it. But not close to the 3,000. I've only seen the $3,000 ranges on these hybrid cemeteries that are usually put up by corporate funeral homes, that you've got the more modern cemetery and then they just threw over a green burial section on the side. Most of these nonprofits and things like that, I don't see them go over 2,200 for a plot. And that ends up being the majority of your cost, especially when you're not embalming and not having, big
Right.
receptions and things like that. People can have a graveside gathering. It's very intimate, very, imagine being in the forest and you all walk in together down a path and the person is laid on a bed of flowers and evergreen boughs or whatever in the grave, and families are encouraged to participate, like get the shovels and place the dirt lovingly, into, or if you really, didn't like them, you throw it in hard. I mean, whatever you want to do. But yeah, families can participate, whereas you've got the sterility of the traditional funeral industry that stand back, don't touch, everything is sterile, everything is clean.
Well, it's
But
lowered down by like a hydraulic something or other,
yeah, with
and it's
green
like,
burial, you're lowering with ropes or straps. Family participation again is what I have seen in my career, is that people that have elected for home funerals or green burials or just had their hands in the process,
mhm,
whether it was coming to dress their embalmed loved one and doing their hair, anything like that, their journey through the grief process and the loss process was softer
mm,
for as an outsider looking in than for those people that didn't have hands on and didn't know they could do those things.
wow.
Um, it's really a moving, it will take, it took my breath away the first green burial I saw. It was just so touching and so moving. And I can't explain it further than that. It's just a really amazing thing when families and friends are able to participate in some kind of ceremony of a farewell of a life.
Hmm, my goodness. This is so fascinating. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I just love the idea, and I've been thinking this for, my mom passed away 9 years ago, this past week actually. And since then I went to like bereavement groups and stuff like that, and I was like, why are people not talking about this? But like we just need to normalize that because it happens all the time and we're all going to go through it at some point. So like we just need to, sort of get our affairs in order, let people know what our desires are, and research what options are available.
Yeah.
But so, Melissa, when I say the word sustainability, what does that mean to you?
For me, it extends beyond the traditional environmental definition. It's like, as a green burial advocate, sustainability is like deeply tied to ethical practices, respect for the planet, and kind of creating a harmonious relationship between death care and nature. Um, whether it's through environmental responsibility, the regenerative practices that we, can adopt in this, longevity of the resources, honoring those and leaving them a legacy behind, facilitating and legacy leaving. That's kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And then, so if people are just like me, just like so fascinated and just like I feel like I want more information. If they wanted to do that, how can someone find you and get more information?
Website is themodernmortician.com, and then all social platforms is you just look up The Modern Mortician, and
Okay.
I'll be there.
And it's the like the THE modern mortician. Okay. I'm like I'm floored. Like I had no idea there were so many different options, but when I heard you say formaldehyde in the veins, I was just like, what the hey is happening? And we pay so
Yeah,
much money for that. I kind of like the mummy idea.
yeah, wrapping them up in a
Being wrapped.
shroud.
Yeah, like that sounds not so bad.
Last hug by the earth when you
Yes.
tap in the dirt around the body. It's just like one last earth hug.
Yeah. Wow. Gosh. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. My eyes are
Oh,
open and I'm so grateful. And now all my Maine people, you have all these options. So look it up in your own state, or if you need um, help looking that up, we'll try to add some links for you to do some research for yourselves. But let's normalize these conversations and do some research and definitely do a power of attorney so that people know what you want. But Melissa Meadow, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. Like I said, this is not something that I ever really considered talking about on the podcast until I saw you. So thank you for that.
thank you. I love what you're doing. Keep it up.